Welcome to Dune Chapter by Chapter. I'm Dominic. Now, in the last video, we talked about the Jessica and Paul were still crossing the desert, and they came across like this little oasis. And at that point, they had their first encounter with the Fremen, and it didn't really go as well as they wanted it to. So the first meeting was kind of off to a rough start. And that chapter kind of left off on a cliffhanger. So now in this chapter, we get to learn the ultimate fate of Liet Kynes and what happened to him. So this chapter starts off with Liet. He's has been basically almost stripped of his clothing, left out in the desert to die. No still suit, no water, nothing. And so he's in vain trying to traverse the desert, but he's quickly dying of thirst. The sun is burning him to death. And on top of that, he's lying on top of a Prespice Mass. So if you don't know what the Prespice Mass is, it's actually how spice is created on Arrakis. It's some kind of reaction when sand trout, basically baby sandworms, are getting ready to be born or getting ready to make their way out into the world. There's like a chemical reaction that builds up underneath the ground and then basically causes a huge explosion. And the spice, that's where the spice, how it gets out on the surface. There's a spice blowout. And so Liet Kynes realizes he's on top of one of these things, but he is so exhausted and so weak, he can't get away. He can barely move because he's lost too much water. He's way too weak. And so he's in vain trying to get away from this, and he has no way to escape it. Now, what's interesting about this chapter is when you watch a lot of the other media concerning Dune, and you watch other videos that talk about Dune, and you watch the David Lynch film, you go back and you watch the 2000 miniseries, you kind of take it for granted that Frank Herbert skips around in his book. And so the whole scene of the Harkonnens actually removing his still suit and throwing him out into the desert to die, you don't actually see it. From this point on, you don't know really how he got there. Well, you just could only assume the Harkonnens had captured him and they did this to him. And so there is no scene where he actually gets stripped of his still suit and they fly over in a thopter and chuck him out onto the sand and then fly away. He's just already there, left for dead. And so there's a lot of things like that that it's kind of different now. I think if this was a modern day book, there would be a chapter devoted to that. But Frank Herbert has this unique way of writing things in his story where he kind of skips over almost events that would have action in them. He kind of skips over it to get into the part where the character is having an introspective moment. And that's what this whole chapter is about, is Liet Kynes. He's going delirious, and he is basically losing his marbles, but then he's also examining himself. And how this happens is he hears his father's voice speaking to him. And so he's getting mad at his father because he can't see him. He looks to his left and his right. Wherever he looks, it always sounds like his father's on the other side. And his father is lecturing him about all these basic principles of being an ecologist and all that stuff, and the whole terraforming Arrakis so that one day it could be an Earth-like planet, and or return it back to what it was, because at one point it was an Earth-like planet with water and all that kind of stuff on it. But so anyway, and Liet is getting really frustrated with his father. You're lecturing me like you always did when I was a kid. I don't want to hear your lectures anymore. Why won't you help me? I'm stuck on the desert. I'm dying of thirst. And he's hoping, well, I'm on a Prespice Mass. Maybe the Fremen will come out and investigate and they'll find me. And then on top of that, there's these buzzards or carrion birds that are circling him, waiting for him to die so they can come down and eat him. And they start pitching towards him, and they're kind of getting a little bit more and more brazen, these birds. They kind of hop towards him, kind of checking him out, waiting for him to finally croak off so they can start devouring him. And so what's interesting about this is some of the stuff that his father talks about. In the in the way they want to use people as a tool to reform the planet or change the face of the planet into something good, which is kind of interesting because the hallucination he has talks about how every other planet where humanity has gone or lived, humanity has acted more like a disease upon that planet. Either like carving out their colonies and polluting the planet and all that kind of stuff, and not really being creating an equal balance with the planet like what other creatures do. Humans act a lot more like a disease. So they want to use humans in a different way on Arrakis. And instead of humans being disease, they would be part of the solution here. And that is he talks about the way they want to do it is by harnessing the lower class masses. So in this, he's talking about the Fremen and all that. And giving them a goal of making Arrakis one day a idyllic water-like planet. So the Fremen, they all have, and then using this almost as like a religion to motivate the people to help them in their efforts to terraform Arrakis. And even to the point, the hallucination, even to the point, if they don't understand the science behind all this, we don't even have to tell them the truth. We can just make up some story and kind of manipulate them to follow us anyway. And again, it kind of goes in that themes where people are always being manipulated by someone in Dune. And so I thought that was pretty interesting. And the other thing about this is, now this has been brought up again. This is like a common criticism of Frank Herbert's Dune, and it's a wrong one, but people are just hung up on it like crazy. And that is, Dune and the story of Paul is a white savior trope. And people even say, oh, it doesn't matter, because if you just read the first book, there's nothing in there to indicate otherwise, unless you go on and read the other books and all that kind of stuff. But there is lots in Frank Herbert's Dune to indicate this is not a white savior trope. This is not like the usual whole idea of a white savior trope and all that stuff. And it's nothing could be more on the nose there about it than this chapter. And because Frank Herbert just lays it right out there. It's not even subtle. It's just clearly stated. He's talking about as Liet's dying, and he kind of has this revelation to himself because his father's not really there. So this is really his own thoughts. He's thinking to himself that he has really done a huge disservice to the Fremen, because basically he hand delivered Paul into him. He sent all these orders out to all the other Fremen that if they find Paul and Jessica, they got to take them in and protect them and all that thing, because he believes that Paul could be the one that is talked about in the Fremen prophecies. And then he realizes, has this flash, and his father says to him, and I actually, this is a direct quote right directly from the book. And it's all about putting your faith in a hero. No more terrible disaster could befall your people that for them to fall into the hands of a hero. Now that's directly from this chapter. And that's what the whole book is about, summed up in that one sentence. That's what Dune is about. It's not a white savior trope. That's what it's about. It's about what happens when people so blindly believe and follow along in a charismatic leader that it just leads them right into their own doom. And that's what the book's about. It's not a white savior trope. So that's something, I just can't refute enough. And but it's just I know the way the political climate is now, that there's so many people that they just want to cling right onto that. It's almost like their criticisms of Dune aren't related to the actual content of the book, but more it's colored by their political leanings and how they see the book. Like when I go on Twitter and I see like a lot of people, when they say why they didn't like Dune, they'll bring up stuff, well, appropriates Islamic culture or Arab culture, so that's why they don't like it. And it's a white savior trope narrative, and it's not diverse enough, and it's the gender roles they don't like and all that. But when you read their criticisms, you have to wonder, like, did you even read the book? And a lot of them admit, oh no, they only got a few pages in and were so offended they threw the book down. So you didn't read the book, so you don't know what you're talking about. At least read the book. And it just seems like they just give it a very shallow surface judgment. But there's a lot more to it than that. And that's basically that sentence that sums up. That's what Dune is about. That's the whole, everything in that is summed up right there in that sentence. And so then the chapter ends with Liet Kynes. He hears the rumble, and he knows that the Spice Mass is going to explode beneath him. And then it does. It explodes, and for one brief moment, because there's water inside the Prespice Mass, and he's cooled. He feels this like sense of cool darkness, so he gets some momentary relief from the sun just before he gets sucked down into a sand whirlpool and dies. And that is the end of Liet Kynes. Now, what is going to be interesting is, now for the film, this character is going to be played by a female. So we're going to get a female Liet Kynes. And are they going to change the death? So are they going to change the death because this is like, I think, kind of like an important part of the book, because this really nails home what Dune is about. Now, are they going to change her death? Because, like I said before in another video, if they're going to not make any other changes to the character, this would be kind of, I could see a lot of people like freaking out that you would have on screen a black woman assaulted, her clothes removed, and then thrown out in the desert to die. Like, that's not going to go over well at all. That's going to go over like a lead balloon. But it wouldn't have been an issue at all if it was a guy, if they changed it, especially if the character was still played by a white guy. It wouldn't have been an issue at all, and if they had the same scene. But so I'd be kind of curious. I would like to see them keep the death scene the same. In my opinion, I think it would work better, and have Liet like losing her mind, because it's going to be Sharon Duncan Brewster in the movie, and then having this hallucination about her father and stuff like that talking to her. And then you could really nail home, this is what Dune's about right here, right in this line, just before the character has this realization that I really did do a disservice to my people. I just delivered them into the hands of this hero, and now they're going to go into because of this, they're going to be destroyed. And he has that realization just before he dies. And it's something, I've read this book like many times before, and like just going through it in detail like this and really thinking about the chapters, this is something that I just always glazed over and never really picked up on, but it's right here in this chapter. That's what Dune is about. So that's everything I got to say in this video. Let me know what you think in the comments section, and I will see you at the next one.